Female reproductive system is the next order of business. And so the female reproductive system also includes a gonad, which we've been talking about. It includes the ovary. And so the ovary is the site of gametogenesis within the female. And gametogenesis, we're going to create a gamete, and the gamete that we're going to create happens to be the ovum or the oocyte. And so it's going to undergo a process of oogenesis, so the creation of the ovum. Now keep in mind that human females are actually born with about 2 million partially formed ovums. All right, and it isn't until we reach puberty, reproductive maturity, that they complete their formation. More on that in a little while. Yeah, okay. So in addition to forming the ovums, the gonad also produces hormones, and the ovary produces two hormones, estrogen and progesterone. Okay, so as in the male system, there was a duct system that helped to take the male gamete out of the body. There's actually a duct system that is working to carry the female gamete out of the system, and it begins with the uterine tubes, otherwise known as the fallopian tubes. Now the fallopian tubes are a structure that are about 4 inches long here, and within them, well, actually here at the end, we've got the fimbriae, which are finger-like projections that are designed to catch the ovulated gamete. Okay? Now, within the fallopian tubes, the uterine tubes, it's actually lined with ciliated epithelial cells. So the ciliated epithelial tissue is going to help move and sweep the oocyte along the fallopian tube into the uterus. In addition to ciliated epithelial tissue, there's also smooth muscle in the wall of the fallopian tube. And anytime we've got smooth muscle in the wall of a fallopian tube, it only does one thing. And what is that? Perfect, peristalsis. So the whole function of the uterine tubes or the fallopian tubes is to catch and move that oocyte through the tube. Okay? So the next structure is the uterus, and the uterus is actually about the size and shape of a pear. Now it is composed of several different layers. Lining the lumen of the uterus is the endometrium, and the endometrium is a lining that is shed monthly. The middle layer is the myometrium. Myo means muscle because it's composed of smooth muscle. So there's two layers of the structure of the uterus that we're going to focus on. The endometrium, lining the lumen of the uterus, and the myometrium, which is composed of smooth muscle. Now the uterus is the site of implantation of that fertilized egg. So if the egg is fertilized, then it travels to the uterus where it implants within the endometrium. Now, once the egg has developed, it's formed the embryo, then the fetus, and we're ready to give birth, then the myometrium is the structure that produces the rhythmic contractions in order to allow birth to occur. In addition to implantation and childbirth, the uterus also helps to nurture and protect that individual as it goes through its developmental stages until it's born. Now, separating the uterus from the vagina is the cervix. And so the cervix is the narrowed neck, okay, right here. And then it leads into the vagina, which is the route out. So we've got a duct system that's designed to catch the ovulated gamete and route it through the uterine tube, the uterus, through the cervix, through the vagina, and exiting out the body. Woohoo! Now we need to talk about gametogenesis. So gametogenesis is the ovarian cycle, otherwise known as oogenesis. So here we're going to talk about how we actually form the egg, and it is ovulated, and it might even be fertilized, right? So it undergoes the same basic steps as the sperm do during spermatogenesis. So we began with the spermatogonium. It divided into the primary spermatocyte, then it divided into the secondary spermatocyte, and then it became the mature sperm, actually spermatid, then the mature sperm. and then it pass out of the male body. So it's a very similar scenario that's going on. It just happens to take a way longer in a female than it does in a male. Now you have a diagram included in your lecture notes, and so I'm going to open up my other window here and get that set up. Just a moment. Okay, so we are going to be talking about the ovarian cycle, or oogenesis. Alrighty, and so we are going to begin with the oogonium. And this is formed before birth. So in the male, it begins at reproductive maturity, at puberty, but in a female, this actually begins before birth. And so remember, this was a type of stem cell, and this stem cell is mitotic. So it's going to undergo mitosis in order to form the primary oocyte. Okay, so we have the cell, there's the nucleus and the oocyte, so that whole thing is the primary oocyte. The little cells that are stuck to the top and surrounding it are the follicular cells. So these are support cells, and together the follicular cells and the primary ovum make up the primary follicle. All right, so before birth, it begins meiosis. So the primary oocyte is going to undergo meiosis 1 because it's 2 rounds of division, and meiosis 1 is actually suspended until puberty. So it doesn't finish until puberty. So we undergo a stage where it's in suspended animation. It stops until we reach puberty. Until puberty. Oh, good, I'm writing big enough. Awesome. All right, when puberty occurs, then we finish meiosis 1. All right, so here we've hit puberty. All right, so we're going to finish meiosis 1. And so right here, this cell is the secondary oocyte. And again, we've got follicular cells that surround that ovum. And if you recall from lab, there is that fluid-filled sac that's called the antrum. So fluid-filled sac. And all of this was the secondary follicle. All right. Now, the secondary oocyte, when this divides, I should say, when this cell finishes meiosis 1, it divides into 2 cells. And keep in mind that as a human female, we only want 1 egg being capable of being fertilized at a time, because we do not want to have litters. And so this particular cell is an oocyte, and then the other cell, because when this one finishes division, we do have another cell. This one's called the polar body. And this cell is discarded. Okay? All right. So we are just following the cell that is possibly capable of being fertilized. All right. Now the secondary oocyte begins meiosis 2. But it doesn't finish meiosis 2. All right? So it does not finish it. It begins meiosis 2 and then it stops. So upon ovulation, it still has not completed meiosis 2. Okay? So if this is fertilized, so let's say fertilization occurs, then we are going to end up with a zygote, which is the egg that's been fertilized with the sperm. It's the first cell of the new individual as the zygote. And then we also get another polar body, which is discarded. But only if fertilization occurs do we finish meiosis II. Okay? So, here we go. So we've got the secondary oocyte. It begins meiosis II under the influence of hormones during puberty and after puberty. We're going to trigger ovulation. The egg is released. It's traveling down the fallopian tube, and fertilization occurs. So within the fallopian tube, fertilization occurs, which causes the, I want to say finishment, causes meiosis II to complete, go to completion. And so we have the first cell of the new individual, the egg fertilized by the sperm. And so when this cell divides into two, we've got the first cell of the new individual, and then we've got what's left over, and that's discarded. It's called the polar body. Woohoo! All right, so let's come back here. All right, I'm going to take a break from this, and I think I'm going to come back because I'm going to talk hormones in just a minute. Yeah, well, let's add some hormones to this in just a minute.